All right, so I'll go ahead and get started. Probably should have started with introducing myself. My name is Rebecca Ryan. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the program director for the University Career Center embedded in computer, mathematical, and natural sciences. So for those of you who may not be familiar with us, the University Career Center has a model where we have a main hub on campus that any student can use. And then there are several embedded program directors in different colleges that work with our students specific to the majors that they're interested in and those sorts of pathways. You may also have your own career center specifically aligned with your major, depending on what major you have. I know the Feller Center is really great as well. Hopefully if you're in a different college outside of CMNS, you've started to become familiar with your own career center folks. If you're not and you want to reach out after to me, I'm happy to help connect you. We want to make sure you're getting as much support as you can, and that specialized support is pretty great. So even though I'm embedded within CMNS, tonight's workshop is really relevant to anybody who's thinking about negotiating a salary or preparing to get job offers. And so tonight we're specifically going to review offer structures, so what you might expect when you're even getting an offer, things you might want to look at, and potential benefits. We're going to explore when and why it might be appropriate for you to negotiate. We'll examine ways to approach negotiation conversations. So what are some sample phrases you might be able to use? If you're a little bit unsure of what to say, you know what your goal is, but you don't know how to get there, we'll talk about that. And then we're also going to answer some questions and give you time at the end. If you haven't had a chance to sign in yet, please do so. I've got directions on the slide here, and I'm also posting them in the chat. All right. So thinking about salary negotiation, when you receive an offer, there's a few things that you want to ask yourself, right? Before you're even thinking about whoa, is this enough money for me? You really want to consider how closely does this offer and role match your career goals, right? At the end of the day, you're all studying different things here in college. You have goals you're excited about pursuing. And so you do want to think about how much does this position match what I'm hoping to achieve? You also want to consider, are you going to need additional information about the offer in order to make a decision? You don't want to go any further until you address questions that you might have throughout this process, right? It's really important that you're not accepting a job and committing to something before you have all of the information. And then finally, you also want to consider, are there any issues that you want to negotiate that would bring this offer closer to your goals? So that's really where the compensation and different benefits come into play. Thinking about, are the things that are actually being offered to you by the employer going to match what you feel you need in order to be successful in that position? One thing that I think is really important to keep in mind, we all get really excited when we get that offer and we might be thinking, oh, I just want to say yes. You're tempted, right? But you have a lot more leverage when you have an offer before you actually accept it. So some organizations are actually going to expect you to negotiate, especially when you're looking at private sector roles. In particular, roles in tech. We have a lot of tech students on this workshop today. So there is typically an expectation that you would negotiate for some of those private sector jobs, but it's also important that you're becoming familiar with the industry that you're interviewing in and the types of roles that you're pursuing so that you know what negotiation might look like for your specific field. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in this workshop so that you start to get a sense of what might be normal. And you can also set up an appointment with a career advisor after. All right. So thinking about the basic approach to fielding offers, there's a few different steps that you're going to go through when you're doing offer evaluation. So when you receive an offer, I really want you to pause before you accept. Again, don't just say yes, even if it's your dream job, even if the package is amazing. It's really important that you're looking at that offer in writing, you're going through the details, and you're really familiarizing yourself with what you're committing to. You want to make sure that what you applied for is similar to the contract that you're going to agree to follow through on, right? And so it's important that you are really aware of what the offer entails. So the first step is just to acknowledge receipt of the offer. Even if you're thinking, okay, I want some time to think about it, say, hey, you know what, thank you so much for making this offer. I'm really excited about the opportunity to be a part of your team. And I'd love to set up a follow-up time once I'm able to review this offer to discuss the details of it in a bit more with you. Something like that is totally fine. So you want to acknowledge the receipt of the offer if it's either in print or over the phone, and then consider what a follow-up might look like. You can follow up with other employers if applicable. So sometimes we'll see that students are interviewing with multiple companies at once, and you might be in the final phase of getting an offer with somebody, but you might be in earlier stages of an interview with another organization. Is it worth it for you to follow up with that other organization and let them know, hey, my timeline shifted a little bit? That's something to think about. Then you're going to really review the details of the offer in detail. So you want to really comb through this offer. Typically, they can send you paperwork, going through all of the benefits, outlining everything. We're going to talk about what things you look at in a few moments, but it's important that you're really reading through that and taking the time to understand what is being offered to you. And then you'll want to ask questions before you commit. So part of setting up that follow-up time to discuss is making sure that you have the opportunity to get clarity on any questions that you still have and set a deadline to respond to the offer. One thing that will sometimes happen when you get an offer is that the organization will let you know, like, we need to know by Friday if you are accepting this job or not. So you don't really want to reach out to them on Friday and say, hey, you know what, I need more time to think about it. Ideally, you can agree upon a timeline that's going to work for both of you. So you're not waiting until that last day to say, you know what, I need more time. They might say, hey, you know what, we need to know by Friday. And you might say, you know what, I'd really like to take the weekend. Can I let you know by Monday? Something like that is fine, but you want to make sure that you're agreeing on that deadline and that you do respond to it before the deadline. All right. So acknowledging receipt of the offer, what does that even look like? So you really want to express enthusiasm, saying something like, I'm excited about this opportunity. This is exactly the type of role I've been looking for. It's a really important decision, and I want to make sure I take the chance to read through that offer in its entirety. You're showing enthusiasm, but you're also letting them know that you want to make sure you're really aware of what is on the table. So then you want to inquire about the potential to negotiate. Is this position even something that you're able to negotiate? Can I negotiate this offer? What aspects of this offer may be negotiable? Or my favorite, I'm really excited about the possibility of working for blank. However, the salary was lower than I was expecting. Is there room for negotiation? Or understanding, what aspects are open to negotiation. That's really important. And then determining the timeline for responding. Is there a deadline for when you would like a response? I want to be mindful of your time, but also think it's important to fully review and consider the offer. So this is just some sample language, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to say word for word these things, okay? And I really want to emphasize that. You can decide how you want to phrase this. These are just some ideas that might get you started. Ideally, you would put them in your own words. Do we have any questions about the acknowledgement part? Like things you might say, or even other ideas you might have? We've got a lot of people on this call. I wonder if there are other things that you have even said that you think might be helpful for the group to share. Feel free to post them in the chat. I'm sure your classmates would appreciate it. Okay, we'll go ahead and move forward. All right, so we mentioned holistically reviewing the offer, right? money isn't everything. It is important. And I know that it's a big factor. So I don't want to downplay it and say it doesn't matter at all. But salary is just one of many different areas that you would want to look at when you're receiving an offer. So you also want to think about things like benefits, health insurance, vision, dental coverage. Do they help pay for prescriptions? Are there 401k or stock options? Those sorts of things can add up, right? And so you want to make sure that you're considering those in terms of the value of the package that you're receiving, and really read through those thoroughly. You also want to consider the culture. Does this even feel like an organization where I fit? Do I feel like I could be successful here and have support? Your location. So thinking about cost of living, commute, living expenses. I've had students who have gotten like 2 offers for the same salary, but they're in different locations and one is more expensive than the other. So thinking about, how much is it going to cost for me to live here? And then thinking about the position and duties, do the position and duties match what you initially applied for? If there's additional duties that are added to this final contract, do you feel comfortable doing those? Do you think that warrants additional compensation? I had a friend of mine who interviewed for an entry-level position with an organization, and after her interview, they asked her to quote a salary that she thought would be appropriate for herself, which we'll talk about ways to approach that. In this instance, she did give them a salary range, and they actually came back and offered her a job that required a lot more responsibility and was essentially like a leadership role over the initial job she had applied for, and they gave her the same salary range. And so she had to go back and kind of evaluate, all right, well, there's these additional duties and responsibilities with this new role. And so because of that, I think that there should be this additional compensation. So you really want to be mindful of what you have said you would do and or what you thought the position would be like when you applied for it versus what's being expressed in the contract and in the description. For some people, things like reputation is really important. I'll see that in text sometimes. Our students will say, well, prior to all of the stuff that's been happening with Meta, but they might have said like, oh, we're interested in Meta, or I really want to work for Apple for a year, whatever it might be. And they feel that that reputation, even if they're only there for a while, will really help them long-term in their career. And so if reputation is important to you, that might be something that's a factor for you when you're making your list. Education. So some organizations will actually compensate you for additional training that you complete. Do you get paid up front? Is it something where you get repaid later on? Do they automatically enroll you in the programs or training, get you certifications, whatever it might be? You want to think about that, right? So if you're interested in additional training and education, that might be a factor that you review there more heavily and really weight in your decision. Other things would be relocation support. So some organizations will help you with moving costs, signing bonuses. They might give you an additional amount of money after the first month once you start the role. And then also thinking about other amenities and things like that. I think we'll sometimes see like campuses that have like workout areas and like really cool cafeterias and hangout spaces. So if those sorts of things are important to you, that might be something you think about. And then finally, a lot of folks now are thinking about remote options. It seems like opportunities for flexibility as needed are really popular, especially right now with folks coming out of the pandemic. And so you might want to think about like, is there a hybrid option if I need it? Does that matter to me? And then what does the growth potential look like? If I start in this role, does it seem like there's a lot of support for me to be able to grow? So these are some of the different things that you'd be looking at when you are reviewing your package. I want to just give you a moment in case you all have any questions about these. And I also want to emphasize in the chat that we did have someone who shared that you can always talk to an HR person as well, or sometimes you can talk to an HR person. So that's true. There are organizations that will actually reconnect you back with the HR person to learn more about some of the different benefits. So your direct supervisor might not know every single thing about some of the different health plans, but they can help connect you with someone who would if you have questions about that. So any questions about these different factors here? Feel free to post them in the chat. All right, I'm going to move on, but feel free to ask questions as we go. And if more come up, happy to answer those. Okay, so what to do if you want to negotiate. So let's say you look through that package, you've determined that there are some things that you want adjusted. Maybe you want a higher salary or additional leave options, like more vacation time, whatever it might be. One thing that's important is that you're rooting your negotiation plan in research, right? So we don't want to just go to an employer and say, you know what, I really think I'm worth $100,000 and you only offered me 40, and there's not really any reason why you want the additional 60 grand, right? That would be a really big jump, by the way. That's not common that you would do it that high. I'm just being a little bit silly here, but the point is that you want to make sure that you're really thinking about why you're asking for these adjustments in your benefits and that you have evidence to back why that would be justified. So thinking about this, you've got a lot of different research opportunities out there. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics has a ton of salary information related to common salaries for a bunch of different jobs. So I would recommend start with the Bureau of Labor Statistics as you're going through this. UMD also has a first destination grad survey report that's published that you can take a look at, where you can see like what the average salary might be for UMD grads. Not every major is going to be featured in this report, only the larger ones, but it's still worth being aware of that it exists. We'll also see people use Glassdoor or even do specific research in the industry, talk to other people to find out a little bit more about what is common. I'm actually going to share after this presentation. So again, make sure you're signing in so I can send out this link to you. A quick like tip sheet that has a whole list of resources you can use when you're researching salary negotiations. So make sure you're signing in, and then we'll be sure to get you that list so you have all of these different resources at hand. So you also want to consider your skills and experiences and why they may or may not warrant a negotiation. So for example, if you think that the cost of living is a little bit different in one place or another, and so you think that it should be adjusted accordingly, maybe the offer would typically be a little bit more for a certain region. You could bring that up, again, citing your sources if needed. Another thing that we'll sometimes see folks do is like reference additional training that they've done beyond entry level. So you might have applied for an entry level position, but you've been interning with this company for 3 years and you've underwent so many trainings with them. You might cite those trainings in your response, right? To really highlight that even though you're right out of college, you have been working at this organization for a while as an intern and you're familiar with the projects that you'd be working on. And then finally, if you are planning to negotiate, it's really important that you write out a negotiation plan, make sure you're using credible sources, include arguments. And I say arguments in quotes because remember, these are your future colleagues potentially. So an argument might just be a point that you're making in a very friendly, kind way. We want to make sure that we are approaching folks with a pleasant demeanor when we're going through this process. You're not like bartering for a car at a dealership or trying to like convince somebody to cut the cost of something, right? Like we really want to be conscious that this is a professional interaction. And so you would want to plan ahead, but it can be really helpful just to have your points outlined in advance so you feel a little more confident about it. I got a question here for amenities. What are some examples of the most important ones I should look for? That's a good question. So I think that that can really depend on you and what you think you need to thrive in a workspace. Um, Amenities might look different to different people. For example, I know a lot of folks who have taken on virtual or remote only positions since since COVID has started. And for them, that was really great. For others, they took a remote job and then didn't have the option of going into an office space. And that office space was something that they really appreciated as would have appreciated as an amenity. And so even something as simple as a desk at an office could be considered an amenity if you're someone who wants to get out of the house, right? But I think other ones might be like thinking about like, is there a little clinic in the office? I've even toured places that have like a hair salon and a gym and showers, and people are like, wow, that's so cool. It's like basically a mini college campus here. Like, so I think that it really depends on your industry, what sort of amenities you might be receiving. Tech really glamorizes it, right? Like there's a different level when you're looking at some of these larger tech companies. But for others, it might be something as simple as, I really like the office. It seems like a good vibe. I have my own space, like all of those different things. So it can be very specific to you and what the organization has. Hope that helps answer the question. Okay, so could include thank you. Yep. All right, so I got another question. Are having past internship experiences and an active security clearance decent reasons to ask for a salary increase? So they could be depending on the job at hand, right? I've seen students before who have said that having an active security clearance is a reason that they should have a slight increase because they were already ready to go with their work. Hey, okay, you know what? Like, see what the employer says about that. I think that's fair. But it really depends if you're going to be working on a lot of projects that require a security clearance. So again, you want to consider what is desired from this organization and what do I bring to the table? Great. Someone brought up a really good point here. Another thing that might fall under an amenity is focus groups or sports teams. Some large companies have like internal teams. Okay. Affinity groups. Yeah. So to give you a little bit of background, another thing that you might look for when you're looking at an organization, and this is culture related, would be an affinity group. Like, for example, I am a queer woman. It's really important to me that I'm in a space that's LGBTQ plus friendly. And so one thing that I was looking for when I was looking for a job was a place that had affinity groups. So I would have a chance to connect with other colleagues who share an aspect of my identity. And so you could look at that as a factor too, especially if you're concerned about being marginalized in your industry, right? And so that could be another factor, and that could be kind of an amenity or even just a culture fit. Like, are there other people who share your interests or your concerns? All right, so going on to build up I appreciate all of these things. Yeah, and parking, good. So it seems like we'll continue to get some ideas in the chat here of different things you might want to consider, and I welcome those to keep coming. I'm going to go into a little bit more of the strategy development, but please feel free to keep adding things in the chat. So having a strategy for negotiating, it's really important that you as an individual determine what is going to be your floor and your ceiling. What do I mean by that? Okay, so your floor, like bottom line, what do you want to make sure that this opportunity has for you so that you feel like you can accept this position? Like, what are the baseline things you need? Then you can start to think about, what are those things that you'd really love to have or that would be exceptional, right? But you want to make sure that you have a really good sense of, at minimum, what do I need? So you want to craft a thoughtful counteroffer and send it as an email. We typically recommend that you do this prior to the established response deadline. So again, you want to make sure you're putting that in writing. I've had some students who will even like send me their negotiation via email before, and we'll just like take a look at it together, make sure it all sounds good and professional. That's something that I'm happy to help you do, or you can work with another career advisor as well on that. If an agreement is not reached by the deadline, so let's say you get an offer on Monday, you send your negotiation response on Wednesday, you're kind of going back and forth with them a little bit about certain details of the contract, and Friday rolls around and there's some adjusting that you feel still needs to happen. It's okay to talk to them about potentially taking a little bit more time to decide on the offer, or even, you ask yourself, are you comfortable accepting the offer as is? You want to make sure that you really don't drag things out. Okay. So don't keep going back and forth on tiny little details for like 2 weeks. Like, you want to try to be as efficient as you can, but it is okay if you need to talk to them about an extension. Ideally, you're not doing that at 5 p.m. on Friday of the deadline though, right? You're doing it a little bit more proactively. All right, and then regardless of the outcome, so whether the negotiation goes your way or not, you want to make sure that you're expressing gratitude, bring closure. Okay, we don't want to ghost an employer. Either the negotiation works out in your favor and you get everything you want and you're super happy and you accept it, or maybe some of the things you've requested, they're able to meet you halfway on and you feel good about that. Thank them regardless. Even if you decide to pass up the position, do so in a really gracious way. You might work with them someday in the future or cross paths with them again. And if you do take the position, like, this is a future colleague. And so you want to make sure that they're still excited to work with you at the end of the day, right? Okay, I got a question from someone privately who said, how do you handle employers who are more firm in terms of a price range that's set, like a take it or leave it approach from an employer? Do you go ahead and explain why you should receive like that amount? It looks like this person experienced that and it felt like maybe their experience wasn't really being fully considered by the employer. So that's a good question. I think there are industries where it's a little bit more difficult to have your salary range vary, right? Like, a good example of this would be folks who work in education. Sometimes there's a specific tier that you come in on and there's very little negotiation room. One thing to think about with that, can you all still hear me? I want to make sure.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. All right, cool. So one thing to think about with that is that, again, a benefits package can be very large and encompass a lot of different things. So there may not be a lot of wiggle room on the financial stuff, but is there anything else that they might be able to provide to you in order to kind of help get things a little bit closer to where you think you should be? Sometimes, and this is important to consider, like, it's a negotiation, it's a compromise, right? So if you have one thing in mind and there's another thing that they're able to offer, typically they'll be pretty transparent with you about where their limit is. If there is a hard limit and they're like, you know what, this is not a negotiable salary, that's something that's important for you to know. And it may not be, the money part might not be negotiable, but they're letting you know that, right? Okay. I'm going to answer that, how should you negotiate when you have multiple offers. I will address that in a little bit here. Okay, so a few don'ts. And if everyone could just make sure they're muted, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, so a few don'ts. I think it's always important, even if you're excited, even if you don't think there's a lot of negotiation room, like express excitement, but give yourself a minute before you accept the offer. All right. It's not going to hurt you to take a few minutes just to think about it, or even a few days. Um, don't get caught unprepared. So if you're thinking you might get an offer, start doing some research. I usually recommend to students that they start looking at different salary ranges and things like that when they're going into the interview, because you might get questions about salary during your interview process. And it's important that you're at least a little bit familiar with what compensation could look like, or even what you think you're going to need. Do not say why you need more money. So it's not typically appropriate to explain, like, well, I have this much in my student loan payments, or I really like going out to eat, or like I have a really expensive car payment. The employer doesn't need to know that. Okay. So you can keep some of the specifics of your expenses to yourself. If you're going to talk about cost of living, reference more like average cost of living, things that you were able to research online and really get a sense for, versus like, oh, well, I really want this luxury apartment, right? We want to be conscious of what's an overshare. Don't play hard to get. So be conscious not to like pin offers against each other. That can be a bit of a touchy subject with employers and kind of doesn't always look great. So it's really important that you're not like, well, Deloitte said they would pay me $88,000 and you're only offering me 85, right? Like you don't want to do that, or like be unresponsive to them when they're talking to you about the salary stuff. Like be upfront, be professional, be friendly. This is a cordial process. This goes into my next point. Don't haggle over the amount, right? And know when to quit. So you don't want to ask for something totally outrageous. If you're a little bit unsure, that's a great time to connect with the Career Center. We're happy to help you out, in addition to the research that you can independently conduct. Don't lie or deceive the employer in any way, okay? You don't want to like tell them something that's not true throughout this process. If it gets back to them that you lied, that's not a great way to start things out. And just generally like be pleasant with them, right? Like this is a part of the process. And it's really important that you're maintaining that professionalism that has helped you get that offer in the first place. Okay, so it looks like I've gotten a few questions in the chat, and I'm going to go ahead and just answer some of these real quick. And then we can go on to some of these FAQs. So I got a question. How do you handle a return offer situation where you are put as an inactive employee for the school year and have a verbal offer to come back where they can reactivate? Sorry, where they can reactivate your status. How do you recommend asking for a raise in pay from your group for returning next summer? Okay, so that's a good question. I think the first thing would be to get that offer in writing so that you have a chance to really evaluate it. If it's just a verbal offer to come back, there may be something that they can put into writing, just like a letter of intent, that they plan to bring you back on. And then as it gets a little bit closer to the date, like you should still get an offer letter from them. And that's something that it's okay to ask for. And at that point, then you can go about saying, like, with this much more experience, this many more courses, this additional stuff that I've been doing, and these certifications or whatever you have, right, that warrants that increase. I would like a little bit more. It's less common for folks to negotiate during an internship, but when you're going from internship to full-time job, like there is typically a change in that compensation. And even if you are just going from one internship to another, you should still get a verbal or a written confirmation. Okay. So I got a question that I think is really great here, and I'm gonna just kind of save it. So one question that I got is if they ask you why you need more money, what do you say? Well, hopefully you've done research, right? So that you have points as to why this, or like why you're asking for more money. Okay. So cost of living, experience beyond like the minimum requirement for the position, whatever it might be, like you should have reasons prepared in advance. I also have a question here. How do you handle a company giving you a tight deadline to accept or reject the offer and you're still interviewing with another company? So I would let the other company know that you have received an offer from another organization and that you'd like to get an update on like what their timeline might look like for the process so that you can hopefully fully consider the position. I would recommend that you also talk to the organization that's putting the pressure on you to let them know that you need a little bit more time. And I get that that can take some finesse. I think that that's a good time, again, to get some career advising specific to the circumstance. So we are here for that. And I think I can speak for a lot of the program directors when I say like we are very available when it comes to salary negotiation. We get that it can be stressful, it's tight turnaround. So like even if there's not space for an appointment, you can email us these questions and we will do our best to get back to you as quickly as we can. We know that this can be kind of intense and they're big decisions to make. Okay, I'm going to go into some of these FAQs. I'm getting a ton of questions in the chat. So just be aware, I'm going to do my best to answer all of these, but I also may, if I don't answer your question today, feel free to also shoot me an email and I can respond to additional questions there too. But I'm going to try to get through them. Let's go through some of these ones from folks who actually sent me some questions in advance. So what do I do when I can't get all the factors that I want? So I think it's really important that you weigh your options and consider what is the greatest value to you. So for some folks, it's the money. For other folks, it might be, okay, money's up there, but the type of work that I'm doing is a very close second. And so in this case, even though this other organization's offering me a little bit less, I'm more excited about the projects that I would be doing with them. So I'm going to go with the second one, right? So you really want to think about what is really important to you and then what might be like a wish list. Is there a baseline amount that you feel you could live off of based on where you're going to be living, right? So all of these different things that we've gone over in the workshop so far, you really want to make sure that you're kind of calculating those things and that you're able to assess if these fit your minimum. What should I do if an employer asks about like salary on an application or in an interview? So this is something that we will see students sometimes faced with. Employers will ask what salary expectations might look like from their candidate. Sometimes employers are trying to get a sense of if they're a likely match. Not every employer posts the range in advance. And so when that isn't posted in advance, it's really hard to know what to go from, right? So you have a few different options here. You can think about your salary expectations ahead of time by conducting research, such as using like Bureau of Labor Statistics, or even like if you are lucky enough to know anybody who's in a role similar to that at their organization or at a comparable organization, you might keep those things in mind. So you can kind of go into it being like, okay, I know what it is, and you can share it if you want, if it's required, right? So sometimes I'll see like specifically if you're completing the application, you're required to answer that question before moving forward. Not ideal, but one thing that you can also do is reference that you're aware salary is just one part of a benefits package. And so you'd like to continue to learn more about the position and the organization as a whole, and revisit this as well. You can also explain it would be helpful to know what the range is for the role. And then if they respond with a range, you can comment based on what is shared. So they might say, our range is 50 to 60,000. And you say, oh, I was actually hoping for like closer to 63, whatever that might be. But then you can also say, but I'm excited to continue to learn more about the organization. And I understand that that's not the only factor at play here. A lot of folks will delay answering with something like finding the right position is more important for me than the salary right now. I'm excited to learn more about the organization, the role, and the complete benefits package before sharing more about salary expectations. So all of these are different approaches you can take. I would say, like, don't panic if you're asked about this. That's why it's important to try to do a little bit of research beforehand so that you do have a sense of what a salary could look like. Okay. So what should I do if I'm interviewing with multiple organizations and receive an offer? Okay, so this happens a lot, and it's really important that you're careful when this comes up, okay? If you're seriously interested in the other companies, reach out and let them know you received an offer with the deadline of X to decide. From there, you can ask what the timeline's like for the open position, and they can give you that info, hopefully, so that you can consider next steps. If you have multiple offers at one time, be careful not to pin one against each other. Try to focus on negotiating with the organization that you're most serious about working for at the end of the day. You can express excitement about the position and don't just focus on, oh, well, I have this other offer that's better. Like, try to focus more on your worth to start out, and then you can talk about the additional offer if needed. But it's important that you're not just saying, well, this organization offered me this much, can you match it? Like, start with why you feel you're worth more, okay? And root that in evidence. One thing that I just want to point out to you, because I have worked with students who have gotten these questions from employers before, you do not and should not share one offer letter with another company, okay? It's not normal to need to do that. So if anybody is like, hey, you have to send us the other offer letter, you don't need to share information from one organization with another, okay? Right. So this is something that sometimes happens, and it is, they'll say that you renege on an offer if you do this. So it's like you're trying to like renegotiate later. So why do I not want to accept an offer thinking and then take another job later? One, you could burn bridges with that organization or recruiter. So this is a case where maybe you get one offer, you continue interviewing, and then 2 months later, a better offer comes along, but you've already committed to company one and company two is more exciting to you. What do? We don't recommend doing this, okay? We don't recommend taking company two. Ideally, you are not accepting a position unless you are very sure that this is the right fit for you. You could burn bridges with the organization or the recruiter. Organizations get very upset when this happens. You can also hurt your chances with other organizations. A lot of recruiters talk or move around to different agencies. And so just because they're at one organization now doesn't mean they'll be there forever. We don't want them remembering your name in a negative way, right? It also hurts other UMD students because that organization then doubts if our students will actually follow through. So it actually can hurt our our university's reputation as a whole for future students who might apply there. It's also unethical. If you need more time to make a decision, like recruiters, HR, they understand that. Like if you're looking for a job, you're probably applying to more than one place, right? That's normal. And so being professional about it, letting them know that you are in the process of interviewing for another role and you want to make sure that, you know, you're making a decision that's best for you and fits the timeline of both organizations. Like, you can do things in a very professional, sensitive way, without shocking a recruiter 2 months later and like telling them you're not coming, even though you said you would, right? So I think being really conscious of this is important. If you're in a position where you think you might need to do this, get some career advising. And I say this in a very kind way, like, ask us for help, because we might, based on the very specific circumstance going on, like a parent is sick and you can't move out of state anymore, whatever it might be, we might be able to find ways to help support you in that. And so it's important that you're really thoughtful if this is a decision that comes up for you. Okay, so another question that we're often asked is, does negotiation look different when pursuing like federal government jobs? So this is important. We have a lot of students at Maryland who do pursue positions with the federal government. I worked with some different HR reps at federal agencies, talked to them about this, just to get a little bit more of a sense of what it looks like for our students who might be pursuing these roles. So one thing that's important is that a lot of federal positions might have a step or a step range. So they might say like 5 to 12 posted next to the job posting. Those numbers correspond with salary amounts or promotion or growth potential. So if you're trying to figure out how a higher step could be negotiated, one thing that's important to consider is that typically those steps are based on education and experience. And so that's why someone is typically like hired, right? Okay, their education, their experiences. They're not necessarily reasons for someone to come in at a higher step than what's posted for the position. So it's important that you're really conscious that salary negotiation may not be as common for every job when it comes to the official income amount. However, you may consider asking for things like tuition reimbursement, flexible work schedules, relocation support, or recruitment incentives. Those sorts of things can also help. So good question that I just got. Are these steps the same for federal contractors? Not necessarily. A lot of federal contractors are more private organizations that then are hired by the federal government. So while you still might need security clearance, you're not necessarily hired directly by the federal government. You're hired by a contractor that's doing a government contract. So this wouldn't necessarily apply to federal contractors. Thanks for that question. And I would recommend like looking at Glassdoor or like other websites to kind of get a sense of like what the contractor's reputation is like with salary stuff and what their history is like with that for specific organizations. Okay, so other questions. I see some more in the chat, so I'm going to try to go through some of these now. But I do want to just stop the recording. So let me go through, finish these next 2 slides about like contact, right? And then we can kind of go through some more of these. We have a little bit of time left together, okay? So just wanted to give you a shout out for those of you who are planning to head out before the rest of these questions are answered. We have a few different workshops coming up. We have a really great how-to workshop series focusing on building your network, searching for a job or internship. They both have dates still coming up this semester. And then we also have a really great workshop happening this week, writing your federal resume. So if you're thinking about federal government jobs, strongly recommend, it's next week, signing up for this workshop next week and attending to get some support on your resume. And then finally, this is my contact info. This is also our YouTube handle where we will post the recording of this afterwards. If you want to check that out, you can. And then we also have our attendance here. And again, I'll be sending out these slides to the folks that have attended, and I'll be using that attendance list. So please make sure you sign in. If for some reason it's not working for you, you can shoot me an email. You can find info about the federal government resume workshop by visiting Careers for Terps. So careers.umd.edu/careers for terps. You'll register similar to how you registered for this event. So it'll be on the events page, and you can click on it and register with your student account. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop this recording.
Hey, Rebecca, I have a question.